Hey, what's happening? Let me check my audio here. Hang on just a second. Check, 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 check. Okay. What's up? Tim Werner here. Today's subject on its face isn't the most positive. Everyone is expendable. However, I think behind that notion, however legitimately scary and intimidating it is at least the perspective of peace. Really. I don't want to get too abstract. Let me tell the story in a cohesive way. I grew up as a Gen Xer, being surrounded by so-called boomers, and the way that the boomer thing worked where I was in upstate New York, Northeast United States, was my grandparents, my grandfathers in particular, worked a single job for their whole career. 20, 30, 40 plus years. And that was it. And there was a two-way loyalty between the employer and the employee and the employee and the employer. My dad did the same thing. He worked for a farm cooperative called Agway for many decades. However, what I saw in the 90s, maybe mid to late 90s, was this trend of businesses buying other businesses. And when you've got a business that has a relationship with its employees, a nice two-way respect going, etc., and then a bigger fish comes and swallows that company up, this bigger fish doesn't have any relationship with the original employees and probably doesn't care. And this is something that I first noticed with my dad in Agway in the mid-90s, but I've experienced firsthand ever since I joined the IT industry full-time in 1997. And that was the company that bought Agway nuked just about everybody, including my dad. And I know that affected him because here he had spent his entire professional life in this symbiotic relationship with his employer, only to wind up essentially getting kicked to the curb without even a thank you in the end. So I got that lesson in the mid-90s while I was in college. So I had experience working. I mean, I've been working since I was like 12 or 13 years old, but not in big business, you see. I mean, there's a difference, obviously, peddling newspapers and cutting lawn and working for Burger King as opposed to working in an enterprise, say, as an IT professional. But still, it's one of those things that I noted as a big truth in life, even though I wasn't yet there with my own life. And so, unfortunately, what happened to my dad was bad. I mean, it was not cool, but it also served as an important lesson that I've kept with me ever since. So it did have some fruits of value. So what does this mean? Well, it means that I have the operating philosophy that everyone is expendable. And that for me to walk around, not just as an IT professional with my relationship with my full-time employer and my part-time clients and my contracting business, for me to walk around thinking that I'm too important to be let go is an important fiction for me to always keep kicked to the proverbial curb. Because I've seen it. Nobody is too important for their job. Especially in this trend of bigger fish, bigger companies buying smaller companies, human beings become nothing more than line items on an Excel spreadsheet. You select the row, hit delete, and they're gone. That's about as heartless as it is. And so, as I mentioned, in embracing that truth and really accepting it and what it means, because for me, everyone is expendable in a work context. Please don't take my words to be my operating philosophy towards humanity and life. No, it's everyone is expendable in business. Now, do I feel that way toward those whom I employ? Of course not. But as a general trend and as an employee, I always have that at the front of my mind. And corollary to that notion of everyone in business is expendable are the larger principles that it is what it is, life happens, and life isn't fair. And I have to say, I'm proud of myself how much of my life philosophy hangs together, because if you've been watching the rest of these Straight Talk videos I've been producing, we've been recursing across some themes. And again, it makes me happy because as a teacher, the way that I design courses is that I want my course to hang together as a whole and be cohesive such that the parts all interrelate to each other. And then to look at a meta level, my whole course library, I'd like to think that my courses hang together in a cohesive fashion as well. So it makes sense that my own life philosophy would have a similar web of connection, as it were. All right, so let's get to some positive ramifications of accepting the truth that, yes, I'm happy in my job and I love my employer and everything's great, but I'm not blind to the fact that I could be let go at any moment. I mean, if I do it to myself through malfeasance and misbehavior, that's one thing. But, because life happens and life isn't fair, I may just as well be laid off because of budget cutbacks. Nothing to do with my job performance at all. So I approach my work with attributes like humility, which is really, to me, just trying to examine myself, those around me, people, places, and things around me, with as much objective honesty as possible, without extremes in any way. I mean, that's better. It's easier to say that than to practice that, for sure. I'm sure there's some folks watching this video who I've worked with and are chuckling and know that sometimes my tinfoil hat gets stuck to my head. But my goal is humility, reasonableness, not acting out of bounds or in extremes. And then, practically speaking, having a backup plan, planning for contingency, keeping my options open. It makes me sad. I see it less nowadays because so many people have been laid off during and post-pandemic particularly. But on Twitter, it would always ping me a little bit when I would see people just overflowing with bubbly praise. I love my employer. It's home. They're my friends. And I think to myself, I know it feels that way right now, but you got to understand, tomorrow you could be let go just like that. And then where's your love and where's your family and where's all your support? It's just the way it is. It's just business. Business is profound, big business in particular, is profoundly sociopathic and conscienceless, period. So I don't do that. I love my employer, I do. And when I say I love my employer, I'm thinking of the CEO who I know personally, and my work group and so on. A lot of times, especially working for big business, the heart of the work, the heart of the people is your immediate work group. And then there's the rest of the org, eventually trickling up to the ivory tower where you're a line item on a spreadsheet and boop, hit delete and you're gone, that kind of thing. But the heart is more the people that I work with on a daily basis. And it's cool that the company I do work for, Full-Time Pluralsight, even though we've gotten to be pretty big, multinational, nowhere near as big as, say, Microsoft or Pearson, but pretty sizable. And I think back to when I started, it's not like I knew everybody, but I knew a good chunk of the company, including all the founders. And just, a handful of years later, it's a different scene, but there's still the kernel of that personal touch there. And that's why I stay. I know I'm going to be doing a YouTube video in the future about dealing with when you're working for an employer and you really feel like a line item on a spreadsheet. And unfortunately, I have a little bit of experience with that, where it's overt that you are expendable. Ugh, horrible situation. And my heart aches for people who are in that professional situation right now. And I know that that's the case. Let me end by recursing with another subject I've talked about elsewhere on my YouTube channel, and that is professional networking. How do you develop a contingency plan? How do you keep your options open given this everyone is expendable in business paradigm? It's making connections, because those connections, those human connections you make at the job and off the job will likely save your butt if and when it does come time to you being laid off or otherwise in a sudden situation where you need to find gainful employment. In my experience, those professional connections have been utterly invaluable. So I'm sure I've got a lot more to say on just that subject of professional networking going forward. But for now, I see we're at the 10-minute mark. I like to run with the precision of a Japanese or German train, so I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot. See ya.